There is a parasite living on human beings right now that only exists because we invented clothes. Body lice cannot survive on bare skin. They need fabric, seams, folds, layers, the warm, dark spaces between cloth and body. Take the clothes away, and they die. Which means that at some point in history, body lice split off from head lice and moved into a habitat that had not existed before, because we had just built it. Find that split in their DNA, and you have found the moment humans started getting dressed. Geneticists did exactly that. And the date they came back with quietly breaks the story almost everyone believes about why we started wearing anything at all. That story goes like this. Humans left Africa, walked into colder places, got cold, wrapped up in animal skins, done. Clean, logical. A 5-year-old could work it out. The problem is, the numbers don't line up, and once you notice that, the whole thing comes apart in your hands. Start with the obvious thing nobody finds strange enough. We are naked. Genuinely, zoologically strange. Gorillas, covered. Chimpanzees, covered. Bears, wolves, horses, elephants. Hippos, all across wildly different climates, all wearing full coats. And then us. Smooth, patchy, pink in places, sporting a look that says I used to have fur, and I made some choices. The leading explanation is that fur became a liability. As our ancestors moved out of forest and onto open grassland and started running things down over long distances, a thick coat meant overheating, and overheating meant collapsing before you caught the thing you were chasing, and then dying hungry, which is the worst possible outcome evolution has on offer. So we shed the coat and replaced it with something else entirely. 2 to 4 million sweat glands. We are, without exaggeration, the best sweating machine on the planet. Fantastic in the heat, catastrophic at 40 below. We had thrown away the only thing we had, and eventually we were going to have to build a replacement. That is the neat version. Here is where it falls apart. The lice data puts the origin of clothing somewhere between about 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. But modern humans did not leave Africa in serious numbers until around 70,000 years ago, which means clothing shows up tens of thousands of years before we went anywhere that required it. We were getting dressed while still standing in the warm. So the cold cannot be the reason we started. It can only be the reason we kept going. And by the way, sit with what that evidence actually is for a second. The single most hated insect in human history, the thing that causes panic in primary schools and ruins camping trips, accidentally kept the receipts on the invention of fashion. They were there. They adapted. They moved in. I genuinely want to know whether you find that beautiful or horrifying, because I have not decided, so tell me in the comments. If it wasn't the cold, what was it? The unglamorous answer is protection of a different kind. Sun, insects, thorns, rock. General abrasion. If you spend your days moving through tall grass and scrub, a wrap of hide is a barrier between your skin and everything that wants to scratch, bite, or burn it. Fewer cuts, fewer infections. Boring, and probably partly true. But there's a second answer, and it's the one that explains why clothing never stopped at useful. We were decorating ourselves before we were covering ourselves. There is evidence of ochre pigment being used on the body going back around 200,000 years, which is older than the lice, older than clothing. So the impulse came first. The impulse to make your body say something to the people looking at it. To signal what group you belong to, where you sit, whether you should be feared or followed or approached. Once that instinct exists, hide is just a better canvas. And the moment a hide goes on, the questions start. Which hide? Worn how? Is this the skin of something powerful? Did I kill it myself? Does that say something about me? That is the entire fashion industry, invented in one afternoon by a small group of people on the savannah arguing about who gets to wear the leopard. For a long time after that, the actual craft stayed rough. A skin over the shoulders, held with twisted sinew, edges hacked with a stone flake. The prehistoric equivalent of a bin bag. Effective. Ugly. Nobody's winning anything. Then around 50,000 years ago, something appears in the record that changes the ceiling completely. Bone needles. Not just points for punching holes, but needles with a tiny eye bored through the end, made for threading sinew and joining material with a controlled, repeatable stitch. The oldest, confirmed one came out of Denisova Cave in Siberia, carved from the hollow bone of a bird, and polished to a fineness that is frankly hard to believe. Think about what that object requires. Somebody looked at a splinter of bone and pictured a tool that did not exist yet, worked out how to drill a clean hole through the narrow end without splitting it, and used the result to shape material around a human body. That's not instinct. That's engineering. And in Siberia, in a glacial winter, it is also the difference between existing and not, because a garment that is stitched and fitted traps warm air against the skin, and a garment that is draped does not. Now here's the part that usually gets cut, because it ruins the tidy story about clever modern humans inventing everything. We were not the only ones doing this. Neanderthals were making and wearing clothing long before they ever met us. We find hides systematically scraped and processed, stone tools clearly shaped for working leather, carcasses handled in ways that show they wanted the skin as much as the meat. Their bodies tell the same story, stockier, shorter-limbed. Built for cold, they had been surviving for a very long time. Clothing was not optional for them. It was infrastructure. And in those same Siberian layers as the needle, there were the Denisovans, a third human lineage we didn't even know existed until 2010, identified from a single finger bone. Alongside the needle, pierced and polished ornaments. Decoration. A people we barely know existed were already thinking about how they looked, which raises a question I cannot get out of my head. Is clothing a human thing, or is it just what happens to any smart, social, upright animal that gets cold enough? 3 separate lineages, different environments, same answer. That looks less like invention and more like inevitability. Then the climate made it non-negotiable. Between roughly 120 and 70,000 years ago, the planet went through brutal glacial swings. Lakes dried, food collapsed, huge parts of Africa turned hyper-arid. Our population may have dropped to somewhere between 10 and 30,000 people. We came genuinely close to simply not continuing. The groups that made it through, and the ones who later pushed north into Europe and east into Asia, were carrying a technology. Fitted, layered, stitched, sealed at the wrists and the neck where blood runs close to the surface and heat leaves fastest. Those with the needle and the knowledge of how to prepare, hide survived and taught their children, and those children walked that knowledge onto every continent on Earth. We didn't evolve a body for the world. We built a second skin and took it with us, and still, even then, we could not leave it functional. If clothing were only practical, every culture would have found the most thermally efficient shape for its climate and stopped there forever. That is not remotely what happened. Some of the oldest fibers we have, twisted plant thread from a cave in Georgia around 30,000 years old, were dyed in several colors. Somebody looked at material that already worked perfectly and decided it was the wrong color. Not warmer, just different, meaning something. Priests dressed differently from warriors. Rulers wore things nobody else was permitted to wear. The dead were buried in clothing chosen for who they had been. We turned fabric into a sentence. I belong here. I outrank you. I'm mourning. I'm dangerous. I'm available. I'm ordinary. Nothing else on earth does that. A peacock displays. A cuttlefish changes color, but neither is choosing what to say based on context, history, and who's watching. That part is entirely ours. Which brings it to you this morning, half awake, making a series of decisions about what to put on your body. Some conscious, most not. Signaling your group, your mood, your status, the version of yourself you want walking around today. That is precisely what somebody was doing 150,000 years ago, stained with ochre, wrapped in hide, standing near a fire, working out how to be read by the people around them. The line between you and them is unbroken, and what connects it is the fact that you got dressed today. We got cold, we got creative, and we have spent every day since standing in front of a full wardrobe saying we have nothing to wear. So, would you go back and live completely naked? Tell me down below. See you soon.